Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much to Ellis and the AF, to John and the Barbican, to Alice and REARC for gathering us all here tonight to learn from Colombia. I'm Manon Mollard. I'm editor of the Architectural Review, an international architecture magazine based here in London for 129 years. And I'm hosting this event in part because I spent a year living and working in Colombia as a young architect, so I clearly left a piece of my heart there, and so I guess that's some of my credentials. This event is part of a new partnership. I think I've got it here. Yeah, can you hear me in the back? Yeah? This event is part of a new partnership between the Danish philanthropic organization REARC, who works at the intersection of architecture and climate justice, and the Architecture Foundation based here in London. And this is the first of a series of events they're working on together, where they're going to be bringing some spatial practitioners from further afield here in the UK to present their work. Like I was saying, Colombia it's an incredible country. I promise this won't be a geography lesson, and we have a lot of great speakers tonight, so I will be very quick. But I just wanted to give those of you less familiar with the country just a little bit of a sense of the context in which tonight's speakers are operating. So we're in the north of South America. The Andes Mountains run through South America's western side. They arrive in Colombia, where they split into 3 ranges. There's deep rift valleys in between them. This is the part of the country where there's some of its most urbanized areas. So you can see Bogota in the center and its savanna around. I've marked some of the places where the architects are working from, so they'll be telling you more as we go. In this Andean region, we also have the coffee region, where you have Pereira, where 2 of the architects speaking tonight are based. To the north is the Caribbean coast. You have the city of Barranquilla, and to the west, it's the department of Chocó in the Pacific region. So these 2 coastal areas are home to a large majority of the country's Afro-Colombian populations. To the east, then, where it's very green and you can just about see the kind of rivers, the whole map of rivers. So you have the flat plains of Orinoquia, which reach all the way to Venezuela to the east. And then you have the dense forests of the Amazon that border Brazil, Peru, and Ecuador. Importantly, there are no seasons in Colombia as such, but there's very dramatic changes of altitude, and so that translates into kind of thermal floors. It means we have tierras calientes, hot lands, and tierras frías, cold lands. It's also one of the world's most diverse countries, together with Brazil and Indonesia. It's home to 1 in 10 species of the planet's fauna and flora. And so the diversity of these natural environments translates into a very rich palette of materials, a wealth of ancestral indigenous practices that are related to food, to gardening, to construction, and to land management. I realize there's no scale on this map, very bad of me as an architect, but you can fit the UK about 4.5 times nearly in Colombia. So tonight we'll be hearing and learning from 4 brilliant spatial practitioners and educators. They'll each give us a kind of 20-minute presentation, and then we'll have some time for questions and conversation. Our first speaker will be Catalina Mejia Moreno, a Colombian educator, researcher, and sea swimmer who emigrated to the UK 15 years ago. She's currently the climate studies lead across spatial practices at St Martin's here in London. Interested in practices of resistance, environmental, racial, and spatial justice, as well as ecofeminism, she combines creative practice, activism, and critique to imagine tangible pathways for social and ecological restoration. Next up will be Juliana Lopez and Jorge Noreña, who are based in Pereira in the coffee region. They founded Ruta 4, or Ruta 4, if you read it in English, in 2014. You might have come across the Amairi sewing workshop that they designed a few years ago that was widely published. It was one of several projects they designed and built with bamboo. They're more interested in processes than outputs. They believe there's a lot to learn from community participation and from self-built architectures. Through their presentations, they will bring this map to kind of much more dramatic and visual effect. You'll see some of the landscapes. And last but not least is Ana Maria Gutierrez, who relocated to Tenjo, so just outside Bogota, you see here, after training as an architect and starting her professional life in the US. She became a specialist in earthen construction and founded Organismo, a center for bioconstruction and regeneration. She's working both at the center and with communities in different parts of the country. Some of the names on the map will again start to be illustrated with some more vivid images. And she's continuously asking herself how to grow roots and what it means to belong. Her work is also published in the latest issue of the AR, another reason why I'm here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it later tonight. I think that's more than enough for me for now. So Catalina, are you happy to take the stage?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Manon, for the kind and generous introduction to the Architecture Foundation and REACT for having us here, and for my friends and colleagues for joining me tonight in this panel. So, as Manon said, I am Catalina Mejia Moreno, a Colombian living in the UK, whose work is informed by the multiplicity of dialogues that these two contexts can foster, generate, and nurture. I teach at Spatial Practices in Central St. Martin's, where I lead the climate studies and run the Climate Forum, a research, curriculum, and knowledge exchange platform that brings the climate emergencies and biodiversity loss to the core of the program. This through foregrounding climate, racial, and environmental justice, but also through focusing on climate emergence, and I would make emphasis on that word, rather than climate emergency in its potential for creative action. My work focuses on the possibilities of thinking of pathways for socio-ecological restorations and imaginations. And I do this mostly through, as you see here, curriculum development and situated projects, all informed by an understanding of architecture as an expanded and importantly plural practice. In my practice, to foreground Colombia is to foreground Latin America and continuing to scale up to foreground the Global South, as a way of critically and ethically engaging with the South. To do so, geographically and epistemically, it requires questioning practices, methodologies, forms of engagement, and a constant awareness of the relational and radical instability of the meaning, location, and history, as Ananya Roy, scholar of international development and urbanism, reminds us. So this is a journal that I co-edited and has this question of what an architecture of the South could mean. So I would like to start with some historical facts to give some context to my practice and to the conversation today. So I was born in the 1970s, a time when Eduardo Galeano, Uruguayan author, wrote this book, Las Venas Abiertas de Latinoamérica, The Open Veins of Latin America, a critique of Latin American history that argues how the continent has been continuously exploited by European and later US powers through extraction of raw materials, lands, knowledges, and bodies. Informed by the long-standing histories and practices of violence witnessed by the southern geographies of our home countries, the book was written in the backdrop of much political and social unrest in Latin America, and especially in Colombia during the Cold War period. Open Veins therefore refer to Latin America as a body constantly drained of its wealth. Today, even if its veins remain terribly open, at least few of these veins may be closing and undergoing repair, thanks to the efforts of numerous communities, who include many unrecognized scholars and architects, artists, activists, amongst others, and importantly, peasant, Afro-descendant, indigenous communities, queer and feminist collectives, and others, who have resisted erasure and have developed and re-acknowledged a wide range of practical examples of alternative ways of living rooted on ancestral practices, belonging, co-creation, and relationality, and help build or have already achieved egalitarian and ecologically sustainable worlds, but also, and I want to emphasize here, affective worlds full of possibility. So beyond thinking of suturing the veins as an economic and environmental challenge only, it is an epistemic one, to which all here, the presenters tonight, are committed. And I think it's in this world, and maybe I speak on behalf of others, that our practices live. I studied architecture in Colombia in the 1990s and early 2000s through a mostly European and Anglo-Saxon canon, and I think all of us mostly did. Our references of architecture were therefore rooted in ideas of progress and development as linear processes, driven by some for the benefits of just a few. On ideas of international, such as the international style, modern architecture as the catalog you see here, or in some cases, welfare models that flattened any nuance and situatedness. On ideas of architecture driven by individual master voices, you can see the index of the book, and narratives rather than collaborative and collective. And on a particular language, formal and verbal, very much solution-driven and homogeneous, whose heritage we still live on today. Some of you have seen this picture before. Lastly, I arrived in the UK 15 years ago to do an MA in architectural history at the Bartlett School of Architecture, followed by a PhD in Newcastle University. I have traversed different academic and non-academic spaces. All this, plus being a mother, have made me even more so aware of the space I occupy, what my body and its intergenerational heritage brings with it to these spaces, and the need for making and nurturing connections and bridges between multiple worlds, lands, territories, and worldviews. I understand architecture as deeply embedded within forms of coloniality and racial capitalism, in a context where indigenous and colonized populations are rendered as, in inverted commas, outside history, as Brenner Banda reminds us, but also, and therefore, as an arena for resistance, conflict, and development of new projects and other ways of living. Hence, architecture is, in my and many others' understandings, as you will see today, material and metaphorical, situated and speculative, tangible and intangible, entangled, while containing seeds for imagining alternative worlds. With this context in mind, I want to share today 3 pedagogical inquiries that I hope contribute to shaping the field. They are all centered around questions of land, water, and beyond, part of a larger ethical mandate for opening other ways of knowing and doing, committed to possible socio-ecological futures and planetary well-being, and importantly, and maybe I underline this, generous in the kinds of knowledge they value. These projects are Weaving Vessels for Liminal Dialogues, a teaching co-pilot, co-designed and developed with Anna as part of the Masters in Architecture at Central St. Martin's, Inga Kausai, a book publication and project, and Pororoca, an open non-academic curriculum. So I'm going to start with Weaving Vessels. So together with Anna, from whom you will hear later today, in 2022, we co-designed and taught Weaving Vessels, a unit as part of the Masters in Architecture at Central St. Martin's, which called to question and reimagine the way we understand and practice architecture. And this was also, of course, done in collaboration with Andreas Lang, the head of the program, and all the staff and lovely students that were part of it. Weaving Vessels offered a path to reconsider, in plural, how we inhabit, teach, and care for planetary architectures. It opened a space to question some of the prominent Anglo-Saxon technocratic, symptomatic, and carbon-centered fixes, responses that fail to engage with the multiple entanglements of the intersecting crises, amongst many others, social, spatial, environmental, and importantly, epistemological. Bringing voices usually overlooked within the UK architectural education realm to this conversation was crucial. For Weaving Vessels, we invited Pedro Jajoy, a long-term friend from the Inga indigenous peoples from Colombia, with whom we share stories, histories, and projects, to co-create with us land-based practices rooted in his ancestral heritage. We hosted the Chilean artist Cecilia Vicuña, the Colombian artist Barbara Santos, and the Colombian master bamboo builder Jaime Peña, amongst many others. As part of the co-creation process that defines Weaving Vessels, our invitation to students was to embrace a loose learning path, inviting them to weave their living architectural practice and their embodied knowledge into a forest. In this case, the ancestral woodland of Highgate Woods in London, by putting 3 scales and territories in dialogue with one another: their bodies, their architecture, and the planet. In small groups, we also asked the students to co-create a spatial material vessel in response to these acts of weaving. This invitation focused on building up students' intuition and knowledge as they relate to a forest, and their potential resignification through dialogue with one another. It was a learning path that was open and in constant flux, informed by the students' engagement, questions, and importantly, emotional responses. So borrowing the words of researcher and publisher Alice Randwachudka, who is with us in spirit tonight, weaving vessels became a pocket of possibility within the students' architectural studies that allowed for a recognition of co-inhabitation and coexistence, of embracing kinship and thinking about futures as capsules that propels forward, rooted in ancestral pasts. So now the second project. Inga Kausai, Habitar Inga, Inga Dwelling, is a multicultural, multilingual collaboration between the Inga indigenous peoples of Colombia, Inga indigenous architects, Musu Hakanamihoy, Pedro Jajoy, John Tisoy, and spatial practitioners and architects Juliana Ramirez and I, supported by the Spatial Practices and Graphic Communication Designs programs at Centro San Martins and the head of international partnerships. As the project team, Musu, Pedro, Juliana, and I have spent over 3 years in collaborative research, community dialogue, and on information gathering walks, capturing ancestral knowledges in 7 ancestral Inga indigenous territories in the Colombian Andean Amazon, How this project came to be. In 2022, Taita Hernando Chindoy, who you see in the photograph speaking to that, here in the photograph, today UAL honorary doctor, invited us to become the architecture team in light of their ongoing project, the consolidation of the Inga Awa University, a project that many other universities also have contributed. It started as a journey to study the Tambowasi, and you can see the Tambowasi in these images, which in architectural terms we would understand as a building typology that has been changing and adapting to the changes faced by each territory due to forced displacement, land grab and dispossession, scarcity of materials, and others. We, and here I mean all the authorial team, went through important realizations through the process. The mapping of tambos across the Andean Amazon territories, and here you see the ancestral territories and where they are sitting in Colombian map. Open doors to reawakening processes of the Inga dwelling beyond a spatial and material practice. The journeys across territories ask us to rethink, broaden, and amplify this query, and to honor a way of living that emerges from and is inextricably linked and tied to the territories, land, and worldviews. Throughout our collective journeys, architecture in its porous nature manifested itself as a question of what dwelling means and symbolizes for the Inga peoples of Colombia in their ancestral lands. This implied observing and embracing different forms of life, as is the ritual of lighting the tulpa, the hearth and place of fire, and share while sitting around it, to enter a symbolic space respectfully, if it's the place where the ambihuasca, the ancestral medicine, is taken, or to the chagra of Amamita, or relearning that sacred plants should be used when asking permission from spiritual beings who guard their territory, and to harmonize it before it can be inhabited or even constructed upon. But also an understanding that the Inga ancestral inhabitation knowledges are threatened and at risk of being forgotten, not only because of the multiple struggles and violences that this community faces, but also due to their native language instability. In the ethics of collaboration that this project entails, returning any work to the community comes first. Our decision was therefore to work on a publication that documents all shared knowledges and experiences, hoping that they inform pedagogical spaces within the Inga territories and beyond. It's a publication co-designed with Habib Victres from Graphic Communication Design, and as we speak is in its last stages of design, hopefully. As a pluricultural team, we wanted to open a door by offering this initial mapping to other worlds, whether in Colombia or beyond. We recognize this book as an invitation to continue expanding and asking ourselves about ancestral ways of living and the cosmologies and cosmogonies tied to them. But we also see the need of strengthening these dialogues as they can also resonate with our own forms of dwelling, from everyday practice to ritualistic, to the spaces we occupy and the spaces that will come. And for those interested in knowing more, there's a short chapter in the book Reclaiming Colonial Architecture, edited by Tanya Sengupta and Stuart King, published by the RIBA, that talks a little bit more about this process. And lastly, Pororoca. Pororoca, Abrazo de Río y Mar, is a situated research and process-based project funded by REARC that shifts architecture into a practice of listening. It embraces Pororoca as a reality and as a metaphor of colliding and embracing water bodies. Pororoca has been shaped by 3 immersions between 2023 and 2024. The Paraguaçu River in Salvador, Recôncavo Baiano in Brazil, Magdalena Yuma, Bocas de Ceniza, Barranquilla, and I don't know if you remember Manon's map, but I will point to it later. And Ciénaga Grande de Santa Marta in Colombia, Southampton Sea and London in the Thames Estuary in the UK, which are landscapes on my own hydrography. Colombia, having lived in Brazil and now living in the UK. But also landscapes that have been continuously transformed by the mouths of rivers and the influence of seas, by monumental imperial efforts of land and water domestication and dispossession, but also, and I underline also, histories that embody processes of socio-ecological transformation, shared humanity, reparation, and joy. To live with and in front of the water is in Colombia, Brazil, and the global south a struggle, a multi-generational one, but it's also a political and a poetic act. Immersions as our driving methodology entail listen to what the water allowed us to, and this listening took shape in many different ways. In Colombia and Brazil, we were giving us presents, life histories, and sounds of the present. Stories, many of which shared as whispers, some with the expectation of us bringing them change, were stories of forced displacements, of threats, entangled with life histories constantly reinvented on these waters, on the edge and within mangrove ecosystems, in exuberant biodiversity hotspots, insular territories, and in territories forcefully set in dialogue with housing speculation and other irresponsible and socially exclusive architectural projects. Listening to life stories implied a commitment to becoming part of them, and therefore to share them and amplify them. In Pororoca, we do so through foregrounding the poetic and affective nature of these languages and architectures that these estuaries embody, in many cases, and which in many cases turn silence into word and action, and that continue to resist and to acknowledge that knowledge is not individual, but collectively interwoven. So throughout our project and beyond, we continue to extend the duration of words and worlds offered to us to understand their meaning and the worlds that they contribute to shape. So to wrap up, I want to finish by returning to the question of language. I draw here from Sylvia Winter. As pedagogues, it's our job to take scholarship and put it into practice. This requires that we are not grounded nor anchored only in academic knowledges, but as mentioned before, generous about the knowledges we value that can be affective and poetic, and importantly, world-making. The way in which climate has been studied and theorized has limited the conversation to disciplinary and science-based categories. But this can only perpetuate the violence and disconnection that projects, such as the modern project, entailed. They are not relational, nor hold openness to embrace dialogue, and are exclusive in the way in which they construct an illusion of a separation between us and the environment. So my project, and I guess I speak of also my friend's project here, is to continue trying to build infrastructure for imaginaries of socio-ecological relationality that are embodied, interconnected, and in synchronicity with traditional understandings of human-nature relationship, rather than transactional and contractual. They are attentive to what we could name as metis, which is locally rooted, experientially absorbed, and embodied knowledges, rather than epistemes or scientifically proven forms of knowledge. And finally, and I want to also underline this here, attuned to the multi-texture hues and grooves that they embody, share, and nurture. Thank you.
Perfecto. 19 minutos. minutes out of the 20 requested. Very well done. Juliana and Jorge, are you happy to go up next?
Okay.
Listo. Hello, hola. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We appreciate the invitation and thank you all for attending. The Ruta 4 is from to Pereira, is the coffee region, is in the middle mountain of Andes. Our architecture is not just about form and materiality. In this presentation, we talk about the process of our architectural projects. We're interested in transcending the material idea of the architecture. In our projects, important is usually for us, make the projects in co-creation with people in the neighborhood, is the ancestral techniques in different forms, the make of the projects, of the construction, of the self-build is the other forms.
Yes, that's a principal moment with the start the process in the architecture. Speak for the people, live in the site, and try to know what is the knowledge or the materials, so different firms to translate the firms to worker.
The project is one conversation. What are their ideas? What are their visions? How do you build these sites? The conversation with other visions, diversity ideas, the multidisciplinary forms, the relationship with the territories is the important for starts our projects. Mm-hmm. In Colombian is usually construction together. Their name is Minga, Convite. In different cities, different names. In this project, in our projects, is necessary for us is the construction together with other people, with indigenous, with the neighbors, with the different persons.
It's important to say that Minga is a meaning to start in Embera regions, to the indigenous people. So that meaning is work together from the together spaces and the community spaces. So important for us to mention this because all our work starts in this point.
The resulting concepts come from our interaction with context. Is the site, the sensible relation, the mountains, the plants, the construction, the soil, is the inspiration for our ideas, is the inspiration for the design, is difficult for us make the architecture without the relationship with territory.
Mm-hmm. The self-building is an important moment in this context. The self-building is the result when you speak about economical, political, and social situation. And in this case, it's a result for the materials is in the sites.
The interaction with the site is the local materials, the heritage techniques, the different forms applied these materials in these projects. Our project is this.
In the middle.
In the middle. This is future project. Is the zone is the understand construction every day. Is the transform every day transform because is the unstable. So you say unstable is unstable because is the territory, the conflict territory is for this. Our projects, our architecture is recognize this,
The sites.
the sites, excuse me, please. Okay.
So that's right.
The outcomes is the result of the interaction process.
Okay. Look at.
Un lugar especial y particular para que cada uno tenga lo que quiera tener. ¿Qué es eso? Les voy a mostrar desde atrás el muro. Si ven que hay como unas perforaciones hacia adentro, veas que desde afuera, que esto va a estar acá, vamos a sembrar unos árboles. Cada uno de estos huequitos va a ser de cada uno de ustedes, y cada uno va a colocar lo que ustedes quieren. Y el plan y la construcción es que cada una de las puertas la construyen para ustedes, para que también podamos empezar a generar ese tema de apropiarnos un poco del espacio, de sentir que es propio, y de sentir también que cada uno tiene un espacio ahí. Por eso es importante que todos estemos trabajando, porque estamos pensando en eso, en que ustedes puedan tener también ese espacio para poder, digamos, colocar sus cosas, que no sea algo más frío, sino que ustedes puedan empezar a llenar también de muchos contenidos.
de tener un paisaje bien tradicional de aquí de San Isidro, que es porque se construyen casas y talleres y todo el asunto, pero no un taller con donde se le está preguntando, venga, ¿cómo le gustaría eso hacer ese día? Y velas a ellas. Yo el día de que ese día que estén las máquinas instaladas y todo eso, y ellas ya cosiendo eso, ese día es, no, ¿para qué más? Ya casi sí. Ya no me hablo más.
This project is a platform of the life. It's the opportunity for the communities, for the new force the life, new experience. This material is bamboo. This name in Colombia is guadua. Is the local material in this site. Our practice is the transform this material for the new vision, for the new designs of the landscape of the space.
Here, you look this material, the bamboo, in different forms, in bamboo slides and different forms to translate the community local materials to another form, to introduce it to or translate this material to construction community spaces. For us, it's so important to know what is the local material and try to transform and use it in the final architectural proposals. For us, it's important that the architecture transform and change. Yes, always change the space with when the people use it and paint the walls and translate the form to the people live in these spaces. For example, this is a picture in a women's celebration, the 8th of March, and this is a space for a celebration or dancing room or a meeting to the community. So important to the space transform everywhere.
Usually, the materials that represent poverty are updated to redefine territories and platform for collective creation.
And we start to, in this case, construction languages. For us, it's so easy to read blueprints, but when you start with the community, you need to explain the different forms or different ideas with the drawings or the materials, with the construction tools, like explain the idea. That's more easy than read a blueprint. So it's so important to the communication easier from the people to construction and work with us.
The other forms is the communication in the architecture is necessary for our practice. Is the important the tools, the make tools, workers use these tools for the construction every day. Is for us important to practice this in our projects.
And that's right, always do the blueprints, but it's other languages to work with to connected the people to the worker and the construction this project. And we always think the construction is a living school. We do the making, learning and making, all do it yourself. For example, this is in 8 months, maybe. This is the project, the El Solar. The name is El Solar, but every Sunday in the morning, open the spaces, and all the people come here to learn to do the construction with bamboo, and construction and apport to construction these spaces.
For us, it's more significant to touch the material, the relationships, the sensible relation with this material, with techniques is the more important for our practice every day, every project in all time the practice.
So now, and this project nor is only one moment. Start and finish in a long time. Start with the initiative and the deal with the community, and the architecture stay in the middle that helped to construction this idea or potential the form to construction. With the end of the building or the architecture, the processes continue with different things and different process. The live to transform the space. All for us is so important, the spaces that can change every day. One day it's a meeting room and the other day is a yoga spaces or a dancing spaces. For us it's important to leave the spaces and try to understand this to do the architectural forms for us.
Our practice is the mix in the finished architectural and process. Is the mix. Is the two parts is important. Is the necessary practice the rural techniques in the urban space. This is the center of the city. Is the rural techniques construction. Is the practice in this space, in this project, is the opportunity for the different forms, the construction of the cities.
Yes, for us in this concept is so important for us. In this special project, the name is El Solar, say the street into the project, into the architectural spaces, like so you can int all the or say to the this is a private project, but always the first floor is thinking what is a public spaces.
The architectural is the light structure, is the relationship, the different space. Is the bamboo and warm is important. Said this is project private, private. Is the autogestión. I don't say
The self-management.
self-management for the digamos in the city itself.
Yes.
Architecture is an opportunity to find new resources and create new technologies.
Yes, for us it's important to know all in these processes don't have high technology. All is a handcraft processes. So that point is for can be do the possibility to the same community organize it and self-management the process when the architecture is finished. So and all is the same thing, the materials, the construction with the knowledge with the people that live here, and so to this know to construction and apport this knowledge to the process.
With this material and with techniques is the opportunity for update new forms the construction in this space, this territory. This project is the mix in the heritage techniques ancestral with the contemporary architecture. Is the use the different materials, the different forms. For this, our architecture, we see in the architecture an opportunity to create new imagined worlds from justice, care, and matter. Thank you.
View slideshow. Okay, so again, thank you for this invitation, Alice, Ellis, REARC, the Architecture Foundation, my colleagues, who I think we're very, very happy to be able to talk about our country today. I'm gonna wrap up a little bit of where you've been. Is this working? Ah, sí. Okay, so Catalina was talking about Putumayo, Chocó, our beautiful Africa, and our Caribbean, Barranquilla, right? Ruta 4 was in la Cordillera Central, our center mountain range, Pereira, and I'm going to be taking you to La Cordillera Oriental, where we are in the outskirts of Bogotá, and the communities of Vaupés and Bichada around these areas of the jungles. What is Organismo? I guess this NGO started maybe more than 17 years ago in my head, but it started happening in the outskirts of Bogotá 17 years ago. Nowadays, it's called a training and research center for regeneration and intercultural studies. I think those are the two words that I would like to be talking about today. What exactly is regeneration? Why are we talking about it? And why are we so in need of this intercultural exchange? I guess I can pinpoint the beginning as a love affair between soil as a construction material, and the ecosystems, which are our classrooms, the jungles and the communities, where we go and accompany collective processes, is where we learn and we question ourselves, what is exactly architecture? what is exactly a collective construction, how can we be part of it, and how can we learn to inhabit our territories. Part of this more than a project is a process of epiphanies, of a lot of mistakes that we've done and that we believe as architects that we should be doing. And the main thing that comes to our table is the local resources and knowledges. The abundance of the territories. How can we visibilize the abundance of the territories so we understand what can we work with? What is the voice of the territory? And of course, there is the love for education. It's like a threesome: earth, ecosystems, and education. And education, not as we know it, because we were all educated on the Western mind, set of mind, but education to unlearn and to embody. We're taught to learn and create this knowledge in our heads, and we left our body aside. We do not understand construction processes, and we lack of understanding how to learn with our hands and with our bodies and start gathering tactile memories. This conversation of territories and an educational process started manifesting in the outskirts of Bogotá. This is Organismo, the center, where we prototype different construction techniques, and where we design new pedagogical programs based on practical approach, community construction, and coherent behaviors, coherent cyclical behaviors. So as we wanted to learn more about earth and more about other local materials, we ended up going more and more rural to our classrooms. And then we understood that architecture is not, of course, not only an infrastructure, but it's about the local crafts. The local crafts are the local vivid expressions of the culture in the territory, the cosmovision, the food security systems, the vernacular architecture, of course, and ecological restoration. And then we start understanding why is it so important to start thinking in the same moment that you're thinking of an infrastructure of the term of ecological restoration. I mean, we can't expect to be using the local materials forever if we're not replanting them and redesigning where to keep extracting for them. No, this is, of course, it's understanding the cycles of life, understanding how we enter and we stop being a lineal extractivist behavior and start understanding how we can be part of cycles and project to the future generation that we can keep using these local materials. The importance of using local resources is that if we quit this dream of regenerating the forests and regenerating the palms and the fibers so we can build with them, then we're going to we have to depend on an economic system that is against the self-management of well-being. It will always go against this. So the communities and the rural communities will lose the self-management of their own well-being because they now believe that, of course, it comes with a wrong idea of progress, that we want cement and we want a TV, and this is what is happening in the middle of the jungle. So it's a very fragile belief system that is going against the independence of the community's well-being. And the cultural expressions are so important as the design of the space, that we want to build, because the cultural expression is like an open book that is going to show you whatever is vivid in the territory is going to show you the relationship between the culture and the territory, the human body and the ecosystem, how they cook, how they weave, how they build, how they sing. All of this is part of the interconnectivity that we've lost or that we've never understood as a base to talk about sustainable habitats or to accompany a collective process. So having these cultural expressions alive and close to you is like the best reading of a place when you arrive, and is the best and is the most profound process that you can achieve if you're looking for rooting and for owning a process, and then for a building to be inhabited and transformed and become a living organism. Like I said, cultural expressions are the plants of powers, the culinary arts, everything that is alive that will show you the interconnections of the human beings and their territory and their cosmovision and their rooting to the place. So we find ourselves constantly in this loop of learning. You know, we thought at the beginning that the local resources was it. You know, we became a training center in adobes, in wattle and daub, in ramped earth, in wood, in bamboo, and we thought that was the end of the story. But then we understood that the collective process around the local material is the tool for the community belonging and self-management of well-being. And then when we're talking about community self-management of well-being, then we arrive to cultural identity. And the cultural identity goes right back to the local resources and knowledges. So this is a constant learning process that we can see in every scenario that we arrive. We end up seeing that every process that we are invited to accompany becomes a living school, or should become a living school, or has the potential of becoming a living school. We keep thinking that architecture is about designing a space for others, and not understanding that it is about the possibility of intergenerational knowledge exchange, of the strengthening of the social web, the embodiment of the local material, how important it is to understand your soils, your woods, your fibers, the ecological calendar of where you're at, which is basically what guides us every time we go to territory, because there's a special moon to cut the bamboo, there's a special moon to cut any fiber, anything that you're gonna take from nature, you have to wait for the correct moment to do it properly. And that will also bring us another learning experiences, that is the wrong concept of time that we have and how we approach the extraction of materials if we're not aligned with it. Like I said, this more than project-based scenarios is more the epiphanies of the processes that we've been through. So, in this case, for example, every process emerges something that we want to learn more. You know, the processes are like these hungry monsters that we want to learn more and more, because things start sprouting. In this case, we were building a seed bank, and we wanted to learn about the medicinal plants of the high Andean forest where we were at, because we were already knowing a lot about the plant medicine of the Amazon. So we planted what we understood was the plant medicine of the area, and then this happened. And then we understood that we had no idea of the plant medicine of our area. So then we had to design a complete educational program and bring the knowledgeable people to teach us about all types of essential oils, hydrolatos, all the possibilities that we had from what it was just sprouting around us. Like I said, any collective initiative, it could be a tiny dry bathroom. Besides the technology that you want to explore and you want to co-create, it's an excuse to go back to the wattle and daub, go back to the natural plasters, explore the roofing techniques. Every little infrastructure that you want to share with the local community is a seed to understand what is the curiosity and what has been shut down because of colonialist approach, because of assistentialist approach, and what is there silently waiting for the soil to come up and for the natural plasters to come up and speak on them. We've been questioning lately a lot what is exactly the emphasis of our process right now. And we know that we can build. We know that there's always amazing builders in territories, not architects, amazing builders in territory. We know that the knowledge is there, the abundance is there, but we have a huge gap in the initial dialogues, in this intercultural, horizontal dialogues that we start in any project, and not in rural indigenous communities, but in any project that we want to co-create, there's always different agents: the governments, the curator, the museum, the indigenous community, the artists. And the initial dialogues are always sometimes non-existent, sometimes very fast, and we don't have the time to develop new listening technologies in order to understand who is going to be part of this process. What is being proposed? Is it actually what we want to do, what we all want to do? Who's receiving it? Who's hosting it? Who's going to transform it? Who's going to live in it? And this is the listening part that we've seen that has a huge consequence. It will have a huge consequence afterwards if we're not really understanding what are the voices of the territories that we're landing. So this is an example of moments that we're starting to not like our non-negotiable ones. You know, we do have vision quest in the beginning of the creators of the grupo núcleo of our thinkers, of what exactly is it that we want to accompany. We don't teach, we share, we learn. We don't believe in this idea of that we're going to arrive somewhere to say what should happen. Then to understand what are the voices. Are the fibers the voices? Is the cosmovision speaking out loud? What is it that we want to learn from where we're landing to really create intercultural dialogues? And this is in a small scale in a country. This is a global south, global north situation as well. To then co-create routes of action, regenerative routes of action, to then have the potential of hopefully initiate regenerative behaviors. So a note of that, we don't believe in sustainability. We don't see anything that should be sustained. We do think that we have to enable a momentum of regeneration, that we can regenerate socially, culturally, and ecosystem-wise. And once that momentum has grabbed on, then we can start talking about sustaining something. So this is some scenarios of different processes where the voices of the community start finding a space to emerge, where the fibers being boots, bamboo, weaving technique, basketry start appearing. When this happens, this not only happens just in the weaving process. This happens, like I said, from the understanding of how this raw material is treated in the territory. How is it regenerated? How is it extracted? How is it protected? How is it dried? How is it prepared to then be woven and then to become a shelter? So that in itself is PhD in the beginning of everything. Like I said, everything is based in territories, and it's something that we want to start understanding when it's not so clear what is the ecological calendar of the territory that we are. And it doesn't have to be in this romantic idea of indigenous communities. It is in our neighborhood, in our community. We do have rhythms. We are surrounded by cycles of life, and we do have to understand how are we entering and leaving them. Once we have a chance, which it is rarely that we have a chance of actually getting all this process of listening to the territories and voicing them, we can, and this is happening actually in the last 2 years because we've been supported by REARC in a process that is based on a human process, based on an ecosystem and social regeneration. And then we've been able, once we understand the cycles of the territory, we are being able to prototype and start understanding if we can, understanding what material we're working with, how can we start proposing different things, if it makes sense to the collective that we're working with. Of course, processes of collective design, collective thinking, because everything is a new experience for everyone. So we do have to go to the job site, and we do have to understand if that wood bends or not bends. If we, how can we structure it together? We do have the knowledge there, and we have the material there. And the collective thinking processes would never be equal to any single mind trying to innovate in the jungle or anywhere. One important thing that this happens is once you understand the ecological calendar, then you start honoring the origin of things. And it is a must to honor the origin of things, how it was done before, to think of innovating or proposing something new. And then this beautiful title appears, which is Architecture for Planetary Well-Being. So we now have this huge scope of everything that has to do with the space and has to do with inhabited. But what exactly is it well-being, and how can we understand that architecture can also shelter thoughts and words, and how can architecture protect a whole territory? So we go back to these classrooms that we've had that are these amazing indigenous communities, pueblos originarios, original towns. And there's this beautiful concept, I don't know if you've heard about it, of malocas, or houses, ceremonial houses. Back in the days, the whole community used to live in this one. This is in the Piaroa ethnic group, very close to Venezuela. It's called a churuata or pureido. It's a ceremonial house. It's where the whole community used to live in there. And it is where cosmovision is architecture. Everything, nothing is aleatory. Everything is aligned with the sun movement, with the four direction, with the four times of life. There's always four huge pillars in the center. And when architectures appear like this, is guided and sheltering the protection of the territory. It's really hard to explain, but what happens inside is the idea of protecting the territory through the thought. The shamans sit inside there, and with the coca leaves, they can mambear all night, thinking and resolving their conflicts through thinking and through protecting their thought through this type of architecture. So then we think, we are a hybrid culture, we're very close to, we are very close to indigenous communities, but we're not indigenous people. We don't have a shaman telling us what to do since we're born, and we're Western educated. So what if we start doing our own temples? What if we start rethinking our ways of taking care of our thoughts and our words and our actions and honoring life? What if we start thinking of architecture as a vessel for a liminal dialogue? What if we start understanding all these connections from oneself, from our body? And 3 years ago, we started to build our own house of thought, which we call the Taurus, an intercultural temple. And it is with this idea of this understanding that once we belong to something, or once we are rooting somewhere, we start caring. And once we start caring, we start working collectively to care. And once we start working collectively to care, then every manifestation will be as a reciprocal action with our ecosystem, with our environment, with the community. This house of thought was built with the guidance and accessory of Jaime Peña, a studio, a Colombian architect and friend that lives in Mexico. And he taught us this technique that is called vigas laminadas no encoladas, laminated beams. Laminated beams, let's see what I can. So this technique is beautiful because then the idea of a column and a beam disappears. Every trace, every geometry that you imagine possible can be woven on the floor. And it's done with the latas, like Ruta 4 was showing the different ways of working with the bamboo. Like you see, you're cutting the bamboo in latas, in stripes, and then you're weaving with it the geometry. Jaime Peña introduced us and trained us in this technique, and also introduced us to sacred geometry. Sacred geometry is everything that exists in nature. And the torus is one of those examples of sacred geometries. The torus is this movement that comes out of the heart that is also represents our magnetic fields and how do we present ourselves energetically in a space. We built this, I guess, we started it in a curriculum design of bioconstruction and houses of thought. Pandemia hit it, and then we stayed locked weaving this torus for 2 years. And this also reinforced what I was talking about the idea of these initial dialogues, of taking care of our thoughts and our words, of really developing new listening technologies, of really sitting and understanding what is a horizontal dialogue. How can we stop this colonialist approach of arriving to a place and saying we are going to build in one way or another, and you should live in one way or another? How can we really understand that we don't need to understand the eloquence of others, but we need to just be there to see the abundance of the territories and make sure that they are placed and honored. This 3-year process, plus starting to light the fire and starting every process in this torus and in this fire, has led us to more and more learning experiences to understand as well, and that the most important thing that we need to do in order to understand the belonging is understand what is our rituals. How are we honoring life every day? We don't need to have a temple. We don't need to have a fire. But do we have connections of rituality with our lives? Do we honor everything that we can take from? Do we know where they come from? And how can we walk the talk in reciprocity, which is the complete message of this geometry. We've had the opportunity of having different explorations of intercultural rituals. So to finish this latest epiphany of the new ritualities is, how can we really think architecture as sheltering, as a caring infrastructure for one's well-being and for the collective well-being and for our community well-being? And what is the territory or cosmovisions that we're arriving to? How are they speaking? And how can we bring alive the interconnectivity with nature, which is the only way that we can actually understand exactly how can we give back and keep building and keep creating harmonious spaces. Thank you.
We can sit here. I think there is a handheld mic for each of you. Thank you for these presentations. I really like the videos that help us kind of travel a little bit and get a sense of what you're doing, where you're doing it, even the sounds, the landscapes. So thank you for that. I'm going to keep my phone to be able to keep track of time. I will invest in a watch soon. But we have 35 minutes or so for questions, a conversation. We're going to try and have it, let's see if we can turn and see a little bit more. But we will also open it to the audience to start thinking. I'll start with a few questions, and then I'll turn towards you to see if there are any questions you'd like to ask one or all of the speakers, and we'll do our best to answer them. We can do a bit of Spanish and English help as well. There's a few of us. I wanted to start with one question for all of you, and I know maybe a little bit less, Julian and Jorge, for your kind of educational and architectural training. But it stands out to me that what you're doing today, your current practices are kind of stand in stark opposition with what you were taught. If we think about some of what you were saying, Anna, and Kata, when you were showing the kind of like table of content of the modern architecture book. So it's a very simple question, is what precipitated the realization that what you had learned was not how you wanted to practice? Anna, maybe we can start with you.
That was a very clear moment. I came back home to that land that you saw, and I realized I didn't know how to lay a brick with 2 degrees under my arm, and I was pretty frustrating. And then I took a workshop in Barichara, that is an area of Colombia that is like the Mecca of the rammed earth, and I was dancing in mud, and that was when I thought that's when I understood that it had to go through the body in order to actually be able to do something.
Kata? I'll take you in order this way.
Thank you, Manuel. I think for me, surprisingly, was the moment I arrived to UK. So it was actually in the UK, being a master's student, and seeing that, like all my classmates, we were all of us educated in the same way, but struggling to make ourselves understand in very embodied ways. So I think, thank you to the education in the UK. I think that was the opening path for me to almost return to my roots, or to questions of belonging, ancestrality, some of the questions that we've been discussing today.
And you're still here.
And I'm still here. But I think it's also like it has been a slow process. I don't think it was an epiphany of not being able to don't know how to lay a brick. It has taken time. And I think it has taken also time in terms of how it manifests in dialogue with students in the spaces I occupy, through teaching practices, pedagogies, but also with staff. Understanding, of course, a beautiful pluriculturality in the spaces that I occupy. So it's also how I set myself in dialogue with those.
Juliana, Jorge?
Okay. We always stay in Pereira, in the middle of the coffee region. So it's a smaller city in Colombia. And we started with a question when we were starting in the university, and like for us education, it's not so clear the connection with the people to live in the sites and the knowledge to the construction. So we start with the question in the university. So what is the firm to connect the people to live in the sites with our architecture, or the mind to the architecture that want to do? So we finish the university and start Ruta 4, and so we don't have more questions than answers, that what is that route, and start here the 11 years before, so work here with the local materials and the knowledge to the sites. So that's our story.
Yo voy a hablar en español.
¿Yo traduzco?
Sí, por favor.
Bueno, okay, I'm going to translate. I'll do my best.
Es muy importante para Ruta 4 la relación con otros estudios.
For Ruta 4, the relationship between their practice and other studios is very important.
Y con otros países.
And with other countries.
Es muy importante para nosotros la enseñanza de Alborte, arquitectos de Ecuador.
In particular, they have learned a lot from the Ecuadorian practice, Al Borde, which this wasn't planned, but they're also featured in this issue, which I would definitely highly recommend.
Muy importante la enseñanza de los arquitectos paraguayos.
They've learned a lot from the Paraguayan architects in Paraguay, in Asunción.
Especialmente José Cubilla.
José Cubilla, in particular, who works with bricks.
Y durante 11 años hemos compartido con otros estudios. Inclusive nuestra primera conferencia fue con Ana.
¿Ah, sí?
Sí. So, 9 years ago. Yeah, we met for the first time, and this is our
their first kind of conference was together. So for 11 years, they've been sort of like learning a lot from kind of other studios. So they found the practices and the architects, and they kind of admired and have been learning from them. And yeah, 9 years ago, their first kind of talk or conference was together.
Okay. Yes.
Great, thank you. What I find really interesting, and I guess part of the reason you're here today and that you're all working with WeArc, is that you're kind of constantly unlearning and learning and teaching and all of this kind of mixes. You're both your students, your practitioners, so I think that's a thread that we'll kind of like return to in the questions. The next thing I want to talk about is the kind of like also the kind of context of Colombia. I mentioned in the introduction that it's one of the most diverse places on Earth. I also recently found out that it's the deadliest country in the world for land and environmental defenders. So there was a report that was published by Global Witness last autumn. They counted 196 people, at least known people, who were murdered in 2023 for taking a stand to defend human rights, their land, and the planet. And out of those 196, 79 were in Colombia, which I found astonishing. I'm sorry for the slight turn that the conversation is taking. We'll go back, but I just think, considering the work that you're doing, I'm curious to ask how this is affecting and shaping the work that you do. I know Colombia is a large country. It's complex. The violence is happening in particular territories, but I would like to kind of contextualize the work that you do against these kind of like numbers. Anna?
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult reality, and it's like a juxtaposition of intentions. There's a lot of environmental leaders being killed. That's a reality. I'm thinking in our scenarios. It's a choice to visualize this fight, and it's a choice as well to protect them. And it's a complex social situation that it's sometimes it's impossible to understand when it's a threat and what is not. But I think part of our work is creating healthy environments where activists can arrive and create schools of own education and territorial harmonization, and that requires, I think, years of work in a community.
Who wants to add?
I think it's also important to maybe contextualize those numbers. I think there is, it's a raw, violent, difficult reality that even from the distance, it hurts as much. Some of those deaths are also very tied to extraction processes, infrastructural processes, multinationals, land grab and dispossession, land dispossession. So there is this still fraud and drugs. So it's really multi-layered. It's usually seen as Colombia is the country who kills more environmental leaders, but actually that always needs to be contextualized. Mm-hmm. Why that situation is taking place, who is involved. It's not just the Colombian government or Colombian people killing Colombian environmental defenders. So I just wanted to make that point because in a way, I think what they stand against is what all our practices also stand against, as is this question of extraction and neo-colonial practices of land dispossession, land grab, of marginalizing voices. So I think in many ways it does inform our practices, and it's also a commitment to our land, our country, and our people, and the knowledge is that this land, beautiful land, has.
Thank you, and thank you for giving a little bit more context to the numbers.
Yes, for us, always we work in sites to this context. For us, it's normal. We work in Colombia. This problem that not is invisible topic for us, but we try to translate this point to opportunity to construction or construction the tools to live better with the community and the local knowledge, and see other farms to the better construction. For example, in our project Chacarra, Casa Ensamble Chacarra, is our first project in Pereira, but it's a invisible territory with drugs and violence internal in the site. So in this case, we have a big leader, and he worked in the construction, building, and construction new processes in the community. And desafortunadamente, he's killed with this organization, this invisible organization. And we think, what is the propose with the architecture of the process we started with work. But it is a topic that not is a romantic topic or not is a invisible topic that in the places we work, but it's important to know this problem and take tools for live better in the communities.
Creo que el conflicto en Colombia ha generado una mistura de culturas en un solo barrio.
The conflict has led to a mixture of populations in the neighborhoods, of cultures and populations in neighborhoods.
En nuestros
Because of the displacement.
Yes.
Yes.
En nuestros proyectos decimos que un barrio es el resumen de Colombia.
So in each neighborhood, you have the whole of Colombia, just because people have been displaced by the violence and the conflict in other parts of the country.
Y en nuestro caso hemos compartido con un líder en 3 lugares distintos por el desplazamiento.
El mismo líder.
El mismo líder.
So they were led to work with the same community leader in 3 different parts of the region.
And in 3 different projects, like so it's special because
you re-encountered him.
Yes.
Y esto nos ha generado una necesidad por pensar proyectos que sabemos que van a cambiar. La flexibilidad no viene de un concepto arquitectónico, sino que viene de una realidad social.
So the flexibility that they have to design for doesn't come from the kind of like desire of the architect to design kind of buildings that will adapt, but from the social reality, so that it kind of responds almost to and follows those movements and the changing reality. Where did I want to go next? A lot of what we're discussing and your questions to this, your answers to this question make me kind of think about the role of the architect, the designer, the spatial practitioner, those realities that you encounter, the different people that you work with, the community leaders, for example, the environmental defenders. And I'm curious to understand a little bit more how you each view your role as an architect. As you think about it, I'll give you just a little bit more kind of context to the question. There's kind of 2 things that come to mind when I was thinking about it. One is something that Charlotte Melter-Barth has written about in the AR, but also elsewhere. And she argues that the architect of the future is going to be responsible for repairing and sustaining the spaces that we live in, much more than designing them from scratch. And so, for example, she imagined new roles for both architects and members of communities. So, for example, a brick cartographer, or a material nurse, or a seed librarian, or a building surgeon, or a maintenance architect. So I'm curious to hear if you recognize yourselves in these descriptions. And if we zoom out a little bit more still, I'm interested in kind of particular examples where you find yourself or have become more of an activist than an architect, or if you've had to act as a mediator or as a policy influencer. So when you're kind of wearing many different hats, and maybe that of the designer is not at all the most important, or even the educator. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'll try to. I always say that I see a role that I see clearly in our work in territory is visibilizing the abundance of the territory. So understanding the local resources and knowledges. That's one of like the initial kind of hats that I can happily wear. That one thing that I am assured of is that we don't have to be indispensables, como si,
Indispensable.
we can't be indispensable. We have to create these initial dialogues, this intercultural initial horizontal dialogues must create self-manage and ownership in the process from the beginning. The faster you leave, the more successful the project will be, because we don't only design an infrastructure, but we design how it will be inhabited. If it's a cultural center, then what's going to happen inside there. And if we design, and if we light those fires and manifest the concept and the vision of the collective before the infrastructure even grows up, then it's going to be rooted and owned by the community. So that's the main thing. We need to find ways and methodologies, however you want to call them, for the collective to own the process. If not, we failed, because then we leave and it's another building that arrives from a foreign idea, and it will be used, yes, but not to its full potential. And then I think then a regenerative collective momentum will start somehow. And then it will be a repairing and sustaining situation. That's the aim. The hardest thing in this project is that the projects are abandoned. That there's and it's much more complex than just designing and inhabiting the place. It's also thinking of the social economy and how can we build a social economy attached to whatever this collective initiative, so people don't leave their territories and stay there, because everyone wants to leave because of economical reasons. So then this objective or architecture becomes a huger scope of understanding the social economy, how we can root deeper their beliefs, their ownership, stay, then help create or strengthen the local economy for it to be really inhabited. I don't know if I answered.
Thank you, Manon. No, I think, it's nice to reflect on that. I think the role of the architect also entails what we understand as an architect and what an architect entails in different contexts. And those are interesting conversations, for example, that we have in the classroom every day. Also in terms of what an architect can do today in the UK, in Colombia, elsewhere, and how the practices are shaped due to, in response to particular circumstances, economic, political, social, etc. So it's difficult for me to reflect on that question, because I did study architecture and I present myself as an architect. I have built, but not recently. I see myself more as a facilitator, mediator, pedagogue. So in terms of hat, I don't like to put myself a particular hat. I think I understand. I think the reason why I'm saying this is because I understand architecture as a more expanded practice and as a plural practice. And it's a practice of relations, and it's a practice of construction, also of social construction, not only material and physical. So yeah, I think the roles that you're talking about, Charlotte's possibilities, are possibilities that are, again, context-specific. And I think in our practices, we have worn and wear many different hats. They're all architectural. We can all be activists. We can all be photographers, mediators, pedagogues. I think it's a hybrid, expanded understanding of architecture that we are presenting from our practices here today.
And is this how you're training and teaching your students? The running thread here for me is also like how you were taught, what you received, and what's kind of changing, and how you're then, as an educator,
I
what
guess
you're transmitting and how that kind of changes architecture
Well,
education.
many of my colleagues here in the room today, so I don't do this on my own. I just have to say that I think it's important to recognize that it's not, unlike my PhD supervisor, so it's a really collaborative enterprise that is set in dialogue with others. It's never on my own, and I really want to recognize that also. So, but there is, of course, there is this question, and for example, we see the UK in this particular time, students that have to take loans to make the undergraduate studies, that have to take loans to make the master's studies, but then they go out and they cannot find a job. So also is what are we teaching them, what tools are we giving them so that they can also practice? So architecture cannot just be one way of practicing, but an expanded practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I never think in this question, but we always say our students, so we don't have the final word in this process. We need to construction together the process. All the process in architecture in when you are a teacher is construction together. So I don't know if these sentences have sense, but I think when you do the ask, the architect is that she is in the middle in the sandwich. State in the middle, but if you don't want she's put out. So I think is the same thing with the architect. It's important state, but not is the unique form to do the things. So maybe the architect or our practices is like a translate the form, the process, the knowledge to the capacity to read the context and the geography and the culture sites and the community to translate to the physical answers, but not as necessary state only architect for duties.
Para mí es importante no dar una sola respuesta. Es como
There isn't a single answer, or it's important not to give just one.
Is difficult questions. Y quiero hablar desde mi experiencia, desde nuestra experiencia, que nos ha tocado, somos como un camaleón.
I'm lacking all these images, like the sandwich, the chameleon, the translator. So what he's saying, he wants to speak from his own and their kind of own, with Juliana, kind of collective experience, and that they have to be like chameleons.
En algunas ocasiones somos activadores culturales y sociales.
Sometimes they are social and cultural activators.
En otro momento somos constructores.
Sometimes they build, as we've seen.
En algunos momentos nos encanta diseñar, crear ideas, geometría, conceptos.
They also like to design, they like form, they like to think about concepts.
En otros momentos, psicólogos del cliente o el usuario.
Sometimes there's like the psychologists of the client or the end users.
Pero a la final creo que debemos tener como la capacidad de reconocer cuál es nuestro rol según el proyecto y según el territorio.
But I think what's important is to kind of rethink their role and position depending on the project and the territory where they're working. And I had a question actually more for you, Jorge and Juliana, more specifically about bamboo, guadua that you were showing that you've been working with. How, I know there are some kind of very important architects who've worked with bamboo in Colombia who are kind of very renowned for it. Again, I was curious, it's a similar question, but is this something you were taught? Like, did you learn to work with this material? Did you encounter it much later? And in the 11 years that you've had your practice, has the way the material is perceived been changing? Is it easy to build with bamboo? Is it easy to convince those clients and those end users? Tell us a little bit about this.
Okay. We start with work with bamboo like a mistake. Bamboo is so common in our region. It's like grape, big grape. It's in
everywhere.
Everywhere. So we start the process or the first project with, okay, we don't have anything, but what do you put here? Okay, we have bamboo. Okay, we work with bamboo. So that's the history about our contact with this material. But in first work, we don't know work with bamboo. So it's the experience and practice and do again every day to practice with the bamboo. And the bamboo is always in our projects because it's the normal or it's a material to the is in the local in the sites. So now we work with the bamboo. We learned about the bamboo, but always stay to receive more information for the people and the builders. So we work and learning always the different forms to work with these materials. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's a beautiful material. It's perfect. In Colombia, the species of Colombia, the guadua, is a structural species to the bamboo, and we can transform in different forms to use it in the same. So that's our story about. So we love it, the bamboo, but we try to integrate the different forms to these materials and use the other materials to integrate in our architecture and practice.
¿Quieres adicionar algo? If there are any questions, I'm going to start looking towards you. If you, I think there's a mic, maybe? And yes, there's a question in the middle, and I think there's a mic coming down.
Hello. First of all, thank you for the really inspiring talk, and I think maybe if it's the same for everyone else in the room, I think it's a very good reminder of why it's so important to practice in this kind of slow and considered way and the impact that can have, even if it takes 5, 6, 7 years. So my question is about, in this idea of exchange, is there one way that, something that comes to mind of a way that you can practice in Colombia that might be challenging or beneficial, but maybe challenging or even impossible to do so in the UK? And also the other way around, is there something you feel like maybe you can do in the UK that you just wish you could also do in Colombia?
Sorry, can I ask you just one question in return? So do you mean in which terms are we speaking, in terms of?
Practice methods, I think, is what I'm thinking about. Is there a way that you can practice in Colombia that you think, it'd be amazing if we could do that in the UK, it'd be so beneficial, or the other way around? Or maybe there isn't. Maybe feel free to challenge the question.
I like people always question the question.
Is there a way? It's a big question as well about influences. I mean, it's making me think a little bit from having been to Tenjo, to where Ana is based, or where Organismo is based. It's about which influences can be brought from one place to another, and maybe like how they're translated. I don't know, I'm just thinking the way you've worked with the earth bags, like the Naderkalili and the yurts from, I don't know, I'm just wondering if there is something in the borrowing maybe of something that is done elsewhere that is brought to your territory, and to what extent it does or doesn't make sense when it's kind of like imported maybe.
I would answer the question in two areas. Technique-wise, when you're talking about bioconstruction or local resources materials, the logic is to work with what you have. So what there's here, what we have there is what just to, I mean, we can import techniques. Importing a technique from a different ecosystem, it's a very interesting learning experience. But what I think can be taken from a global south scenario to a global north scenario, which I think is worth it, to a rural scenario, from a rural scenario to an urban scenario, is the cooperation methodologies. This rooting, this ownership of the process. It could be in the periferia neighborhoods in a city in Colombia or in London. We did work here in this process of vessels for liminal dialogues with the students in Highgates. So I think this is where we can see the different manifestations, what emerges in process in rurality, in urbanity, in global north, in global south, if we're aiming to create a collective process, to understand the living cycles, to work with the local resources, to create ownership, to do horizontal capacitaciones. So these things, I think, could be shared and should be shared and transferred, because it's the idea of this architecture that it's collective, that is about understanding our habitat.
This might apply as well to the more kind of participatory processes that you work with. I mean, I know you work in Colombia and not here, and maybe it's hard to kind of project, but I guess.
See, I think it's what I'm talking about. Exactly this collective process is like. I think we do the same. We have the same momentum of how we work in the jungle or in the periferia of Pereira. Mm-hmm. In the middle of the Andeans or in the jungle is what we do in the center is what we learn from the communities in the jungle. And actually we will learn from them. And this comes from an ancestral way of building, which is called the mingas, that everyone got together. And that was how it was done. And we all built everyone's houses. And with the sancocho and with the grandmother. And this is kind of what we're now calling a collective methodology, but it was a minga forever. Yeah. It's how the pueblos originarios were built. So this is what I think should be sprout again in our ideas of co-creation.
Independently of the context, in the global south, in the global north, in rural territories, in more urban.
Cultural expression was a basketry in the photos that I showed you, but cultural expression in the streets is hip hop, or or whatever. That's what is rooted in that neighborhood, and that's what is creating the connection between the culture and that ecosystem, that neighborhood, and that is the same understanding wherever you are.
I would like to add that. I think in terms of the, I think going back to like this teaching unit that we did together, which was a question of, it's exactly trying to answer the question that you were asking us. How can methodologies from Colombia could be brought into a teaching space in London, and what kind of conversation can emerge from that? And it was a beautiful experiment. It was really beautiful experiment because once we started to think about questions, for example, of belonging, every single student recognized a different belonging. And then that therefore informed the relationship to a forest, and therefore informed the group dialogue, and therefore informed the vessel that they wove together. So methodologically, I think it's not, they could be done anywhere. I think there might be a slight difference is in the languages that we use, both verbal, formal, material, social, and where these come from. But also I think in the way that we, I think, there's something being a Colombian living in the UK that I miss, and it's como la sabrosura, no? There's a certain joy despite of. There's a certain joy despite of, there's a certain poetry despite of, there's a certain speed of the processes that are very site-specific and that cannot be translated. But otherwise, of course, there are many things that could be and are universal. I guess it's just the way that we do them, that they manifest differently.
Is there another question? Yes. I love the excitement.
Quiero adicionar algo ahí.
Sí.
Sí, muy simple.
Sí.
Pero quiero como contar que en Colombia siempre es el mismo clima.
In Colombia, the climate is constant. I mean, it's close to the equator.
And
the climate is the same year round.
Tal vez es una respuesta simple a hablar de unas metodologías y un proceso. Pero yo como arquitecto quiero entender que esta condición geográfica sí particulariza el sitio y la práctica de alguna manera.
And so the specificities of the site inform the modes of practice. I mean, the climate is constant, but obviously in different parts of the country, it's different.
Yeah, depending on their height.
Exactly, on the
Depending on where
altitude,
we are.
yeah.
But not is so different. It's like when we don't have winter and summer.
Yeah.
But so
Yeah,
yes, the difference for Bogota and Pereira.
the climate is always
Yes.
Yeah, we have thermal floors. We
Uh-huh.
don't have seasons, and that makes the processes very particular.
Sorry,
Okay.
there was a question, yeah.
Yeah, hi. So I think personally the problem with the West, especially London, is the obsession with risk assessment and risks. So you would never have a grandma cooking anything for anyone because it has risk assessment problems. And you would never have young people who are not, I don't know, builders trained in the building site because risk assessment. So my question is, in Colombia, how do you manage risk assessment?
Well, you go and work in the jungle. And then no one,
Can I also say is risk assessment and finding, the risk assessment is a nightmare. And also like the obsession with finding immediate solutions. No? So it's everything has to be solved now without technology now. Which I think it touches up risk assessment slightly, but yeah, that's an obsession I personally struggle with too.
Sí, no. Digamos así.
Es que es normal, o sea, siempre estamos. No, estoy pensando en español, perdón.
There was a bit jet lagged and there was a bit. Si quieres.
Siempre está ahí, o sea, estamos en medio de, ¿cierto? Y cómo usamos eso para el beneficio, o sea, para el proyecto. No es un tema no es un tabú, o sea, sí, está ahí. O sea, los riesgos.
The risk is there.
Yes.
And you live with it, you mean?
Sí, es parte.
See, yeah, and it's a social dynamic, of course. Here, everything works very different, of course, and there's much more limitation and permits and for anything that you want to do. And in the global processes that I've seen in the global north of strong collective urban peripheria processes that I've seen in the global north are activisms to where the territory are the streets, where where there's a safety guaranteed by the collective dynamic installed among the ownership and the well-being of, it's activism a little bit in a safety way. And when I say that in the jungle there's no risk assessment, there is a lot of risks, but they know how to handle, and we are taken care by them, and we learn from the locals to know how to take care of themselves. So urbanly, I've seen activist process, collective building processes that are big, strong movements. But what I think it's a regenerative social web practice that becomes a collective safeguard of a little of the interventions to happen.
Sí, yo como no quiero romantizar el riesgo, ¿cierto?
Doesn't want to romanticize risk,
¿Ves?
but there's one coming.
Sí, porque es divertido vivir en Latinoamérica. ¿Cómo no?
It's fun to live in Latin America.
Sí. Podemos ir arriba de un carro rápido y es divertido.
The example is to sit like on top of a car while it's like running, obviously.
Pero no queremos el riesgo y por eso creo que estamos sentados acá hablando de cómo construir lugares seguros. Pero la pulsión de vivir, la pulsión de construir nuestros espacios no nos detiene. Y no nos detiene es la idea de el riesgo desaparece. Porque
They don't ignore. I'm trying to remember now. I forgot the beginning. They they are aware of the risk, and yes, there is the kind of like fun side of things, that the kind of fewer rules and regulations that allow you to do things. But at the end of the day, part of the job is also to eliminate some of these risks and to build safe spaces. ¿Y dijiste otra cosa después?
Del pulso de construir los espacios.
That it doesn't stop. Yes. That those risks also like don't stop them from the kind of the impulse of living.
Y por eso lo hacemos.
And that's why we do it.
Sí, no hay como buscamos no tener barreras. Como que los bordes, los límites en Latinoamérica son constantes y nuestra búsqueda es construir puentes en esos bordes, que son el riesgo.
There are also many other forms of kind of barriers and borders and things that kind of like impinge on their practice, but what they're trying to do is to build beyond it, to build bridges, and to, because I guess it's also, I mean, it feels to me that it's worth saying that you're not working in kind of conventional ways either. Like, it's also not a kind of generalization. I mean, there's a lot of kind of much more conventional architecture practices in Colombia where there's a lot more risk assessment, and there's, it's just that how you're interested in working is building your own kind of alternative forms of practice. It's what they're doing is not the norm either, which I think is worth mentioning.
But we were just like sharing a thought, and I think that risk assessment is also very much tied with fear and limitations. So just to give you an example, I mean, in these Pororoca immersions that we did in Salvador, in Brazil, I mean, we did all sorts of things. When we arrived here to the UK, and because I've been living here, I'm a little bit more used to it, but it was it was like facing it again. And my colleagues, we were walking along the Thames Estuary, and it was like, don't swim, don't fish, no barbecues, fence. Like, so I think it limits, and I think in Colombia and Latin America we feel much more free despite the risk. Of course, there's risk. There are many risks everywhere. There's risk, but it's this thing of fear, like the risk assessments stops you from doing something. And I think we live. I mean, in Colombia, it's much more free.
We are running out of time, and there's more and more hands. Yes, let's take one question here at the front.
To add one comment
Yes.
to the question of risk, which had already been raised in terms of the danger to working in some of these territories. And I work with the BBC, where you have to do formal risk assessments. I've been working for nearly 40 years in Colombia, and I have big difficulties marrying the two things together. But the risk assessment in Colombia, in my experience, is something performed by the community I'm going into, which will take great care to ensure that nothing will happen to me, because there is a sense of personal responsibility. And in the kind of work you're describing, I believe that is what will be going on all the time, is that the community will take responsibility for the architect.
So, yeah, this is fantastic that you name it, because and it's one of the main gaps between this understanding of this difference between the global north and global south. When we go to territory, yes, it is riskful to be there, but we enter into different norms of safety. And first of all, we ask for permission. We're prayed for our arrival. There's ceremonies that will make you safe when you arrive and when you leave. You actually, one of our partners is now in territory, and she was telling me that she couldn't take a shower yet today because she got her period and she was waiting for the shaman to do a pray on her in order for her to take a bath. So you're very well taken care of, but it's just other loss is actually part of their cosmovision and is part of the whole ecosystem, and that's, I mean, we always feel that we arrive home when we go there to another type of risk assessment.
Can I take one last question, Alice?
This question, which is waiting.
As you all articulate really insightfully, community participation is critical to achieving environmental and social sustainability. My question is, how do architects ensure they facilitate genuine consultations with communities rather than treat them as box-ticking exercises?
That's the main thing for a real co-creation with a community. And it's those initial dialogues. And it's how to engage a conversation, how to invite a conversation, how to close the gap between the different eloquences. Sometimes we work in areas where there's no Spanish, it's just a different ethnic group. So how to do all the processes of consulting the shaman to get the permit to even start a conversation. Are they interested or not? And this is the main thing, because there's never neither time or money for these processes. You wanna take a picture and then romanticize the whole community process. And this is exactly what guarantees if there's ownership and there's rooting of whatever you build or you help build or you accompany. And is that the process comes from the voices of the territory. I can't be more emphatic about it, but this is where we fail. No, we have to start building now. No, this thing has to be built in 3 months, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, we can have a medicine house, but we can also have a school, but and then you're building something that they don't even need. And it's and the whole colonization dynamic is not only it has made them see us as they come and teach us, they come and give us, so they should know. So to break that initial dialogue, to really start creating horizontal, is months and months of trust. The trust is the main thing in order for them to start seeing what we really need is a kitchen, a community kitchen for everyone. What is happening here is really this. So it's building trust, I would say. And no boxes, no encuestas, just human interaction, just human healthy, creating bonds.
Thank you.
¿Quieres adicionar algo?
Sí.
Cortico, porque ya estamos.
Dale. En nuestro primer momento llegábamos con planos, llegábamos como con una investidura de arquitectos.
When they started, they would arrive with the plans, the drawings, adopting the kind of posture of the architect.
Y veíamos que la comunidad no nos decía qué quería.
And as a result, they weren't hearing, the community wouldn't tell them what they wanted.
Nos tenían miedo.
They were scared.
Porque éramos unos seres extraños que hablaban otro lenguaje.
They were kind of foreigners speaking a different language.
Un día cualquiera decidimos hacer el primer encuentro con un baile.
¿Con un?
Baile.
Dance. That's what, okay. They changed their kind of approach, and they thought they would start by dancing.
Y ese día la comunidad empezó a decirlo todo.
And at that point, they gained the trust of that community. So the community started talking to them.
Ese día descubrimos que nuestra búsqueda es saber qué les gusta, cómo viven, y desde ahí nos van a narrar su mundo, no nuestro mundo.
That in order for the community to tell them what they want, which is what they're trying to get to know, they have to kind of inhabit their world so that they can, lo dijiste mucho mejor. He said it in a much more articulate way than I'm doing now. But if they enter their world, the community will share in return what they want and what they need and how they view the world. I think we're out of time. We're already out of time. I think there will be a few more minutes kind of outside where there might be time to kind of continue the conversation. I just want to add that I've shown it a few times now, but we have some copies of the March issue of the AR that are for sale outside. The work of Ana is published inside an Organismo. There's also other ecofeminist practitioners. And more generally, that issue celebrates the incredible contribution of women and non-binary people to the field of architecture around the world. There's projects in Ecuador, in Saudi Arabia, in France, in South Africa, Palestine, and the UK. It's very important for me to highlight, as an editor to highlight that the copy sales and the subscriptions all help support the work of the AR's editorial team, as well as that of the contributors. And it enables us to keep both architecture criticism and print magazines alive. So there's Ruben and Carolina who are outside. If you have any questions about the magazine, they'll be very happy to answer. Ellis, are there any announcements from your side? All good? I think Lucian Spadmaraban is the next architecture on stage. And the week, perfect. So you can book your tickets on the Barbican website. And thanks so much, Catalina, Juliana, Jorge, Ana, for sharing your worlds, for opening the kind of conversations and dialogues between Colombia and the UK, and making us all rethink, I think, how we practice, how we design, and how we teach. So thank you so much.
Thank you.